Hi everyone, I'm Matea from the Developer Experience team here in Memgraph, and today I'm going to show you how to import your CSV files directly from Memgraph Lab using the new CSV file import tool. Here we can see the schema of our data. We can see that our nodes have certain labels. Each node can have either employee, order, or product type of label. Each node also has a set of properties and can be connected with certain relationships. Here we have relationship type reports to, sold, and contains. So if we look at our data, we can see that each employee reports to another employee, that each employee sold some type of order, and order contains some type of product. The easiest way to get started with Memgraph is by running it with Docker. Here in our docs, you can see different ways on how you can install Memgraph, connect to the database, and get started with Memgraph in general. Now, if you choose to run Memgraph with Docker, just make sure that you have Docker desktop running in the background. So right now, we're just going to copy our Docker run command. It runs a Memgraph instance that uses port 7687 in order to communicate with the database, port 7444 in order to gain access to logs, and port 3000 in order to use Memgraph Lab, which is our visual tool that helps you with the visualization of the data that you have in your database. Besides that, you can name your instance whatever you like, and you can use images that we have on our Docker Hub. Right now, we're going to use Memgraph Platform image since it includes Memgraph Database, MG Console, Memgraph Lab that I already mentioned, and Mage Library. It's a library with a complete set of advanced algorithms that help you work with your database. So after we've copied our command, we're going to open our terminal and let it download or pull our image. Now that our image has been downloaded and Memgraph instance is running, we can start playing around with it. Now in this terminal, we have a running Memgraph instance, so we're going to open up another terminal. And here, if you run a docker ps command, you can see, I'm just going to make it a bit larger, you can see that you have a running Memgraph instance. Your instance is called Memgraph because we named it that way. It uses Memgraph platform image. You can see the ports it's using and the container ID that we have. You can always stop your container and start it up again without having to start the instance again. So you can use docker stop, and then you can either use the name of your container or the ID of the container. I'm just going to use name, so docker stop Memgraph instance. Docker is going to show you that the instance has been stopped, and you can start it up again using the docker start and the name of the container. Okay, now our instance is running again. And since we've used a platform image, so Memgraph platform image that includes Memgraph Lab, if you go to the localhost 3000, you can see that you can connect to your Memgraph instance in just a moment. And after you've connected, you're going to see your instance. Besides using Lab as a browser version, you can also download Memgraph Lab as a desktop version. So if you go Memgraph Lab download, you're going to end up probably on Memgraph Download Hub. Here you can see different versions of Memgraph you can download. And along those, you can download Memgraph packages individually, including Memgraph Lab as a desktop version. Here you can choose the version of Memgraph and the environment that you have and just download it as a desktop application. Now that our Memgraph Lab has downloaded, we are going to use a quick connect button to connect to our instance we've created. Now I'm going to show you a short overview of Memgraph Lab's interface before we get started with the import. So here we can see how many nodes, relationship indexes, constraints, and triggers we have in our database, as well as the memory we've currently used and that we have total available. Besides that, we have a query execution window where we can execute our queries and retrieve data from your database. We also have a new feature called Graph Chat that helps you, that is an OpenAI integration with Memgraph Lab, and it helps you query your database using a natural language. Besides that, we have a run history and collection. So run history shows you All the previously ranked queries and collections help you save your favorite queries, queries you use often and maybe are complicated and you don't want to write all over again every time. Besides that, we have some query modules. Query modules are algorithms available in our Mage library. Since we ran a Memgraph platform image, we have those algorithms included in that image. And here you can see all of the algorithms that are available so you can run over your data set. We also have streams that you can connect to Kafka Pulsar stream, ingest and model data. We have a graph schema you can generate. We have some previously made data sets that helps you maybe play around with Memgraph before you have your own data set. And the import feature that you can import data with CSV file, which I'm going to show you today. You can connect to a Kafka Pulsar stream, or you can use the Cipher-L file import. Besides import, you also have the possibility to export your data using the Cipher-L file export. You also have available logs. So here you can see the state of your database, the queries you're running, some warning messages you might have, or anything that's happening in the background. And you have an option of adding or different layouts, so adding vertical or horizontal splits. So for instance, I can have my logs in the left window and I can have my query execution in the right window. If at the same time I maybe want to generate my graph schema and see how that looks like, you can also add a horizontal split and add your graph schema here. So all of the layout possibilities are however you would like your interface to look. Now, before we actually get started with importing our data, we first need to prepare our CSV files. Now, keep in mind, this is the dummy data, so the values don't make much sense, but it will serve the purpose. So we have three types of label: employee label, order label, and product label, as well as three types of relationships, which are reports to, sold, and contain relationship. Right now, what we need to do is we need to separate this file into separate files for each label. So one file is going to contain all of the information related to the employee label. Our second CSV file is going to be all of the information related to the order label. Third file, product label. Fourth file, reports to relationship type. Fifth file is going to be sold relationship type. And sixth file is going to be the contains relationship type. Now, when you are separating your file, keep in mind the best practice is to clean up all of your unnecessary columns. So for instance, for the employee label, we need the ID field, employee, first name, last name, node ID, and title. All of the other ones are related to the other either label or relationship type, so we don't necessarily need those. I'm going to separate my file, clean it up, and then be right back. I just finished cleaning up my data and separating my CSV file. Now here an example, you can see the employee.csv file. I've decided to keep the label even though we're not going to need it later. But besides that, I kept the ID, employee, first name, last name, node ID, and the title. The rest of the fields were empty for my employee label, so I decided to clean them up just not to take any more space than I need to. And here you can see the example of the employee.csv, and here we have a reports to relationship type. So for the relationships, I only decided to keep the start and the type of the relationship because that's the only thing we need. Now that we've prepped our CSV files, we can start with the actual import process. So here in Memgraph Lab, I already mentioned the import window. You're going to choose the CSV file import since we're importing our CSV files, and you can choose whether you want to merge with your current data set or drop the database and start from scratch. It's all the same for me because I have nothing in my database, but I'm going to choose to drop the database and start from the scratch nonetheless. And now you're going to select all of your CSV files that you have. So here I'm going to select my employee.csv, my order.csv, product.csv. Those are all, I forgot order, those are all the CSVs related to the nodes. And I'm also going to drop the reports to relationships, sold relationship, and contains relationship. And those are all the CSV files we're going to need. And now we can go on to the next step. After we've uploaded our files, we now need to configure the data to import. What that means is if you click on, for instance, employee.csv, you can choose whether you're adding a node or edge. Since employee is the label for our node, we're going to add a new node with the label employee. And we want to add index on that label. Why? Because indexes, as stated here, do speed up queries. So it's always a good practice if you have a lot of labels to shorten your scanning process and fasten your performance. And now for the employee, you want to add a property and you have to choose from the drop down. So on the drop down, you can see all of the possibilities that are extracted from your CSV files. On the left side, you can choose whether your CSV file has a header row or not. Ours does. And you're going to be able to see the preview of the file. So for the ID, the first row is 0. For the label, it's employee ID is E1, and etc. So I'm going to choose all of these because all of these are related to my employee label. So I'm going to choose the ID property, and that ID property is an integer type. Now you can choose, does this property have to be unique? Does it have to be required? And do I want it to be indexed? Since ID is the most important property that our nodes have, I want it to be unique. I want it to be required. I want all of my nodes with the employee label to have that property. And I want it to be indexed because that's what I'm going to scan the most when searching for a certain node. After I chose all of my properties, you have to configure each and every single one of them. So be careful when configuring. For instance, our employee ID, even though it's ID, it's not integer because it contains the letter E, so that's a string. And same for all of the rest. You can choose whether it's going to be a string, integer, float, boolean, date, local time, local date time, or duration. And you can choose whether your field is unique, whether it's required or indexed. After configuring everything, you can also choose what would you like to do in case of duplicates. So if some of your nodes are duplicates, you can either import everything and have duplicates, you can merge everything and overwrite the existing data, or you can skip and discard duplicates in favor of existing data. So keep the existing one. I'm going to choose to merge everything. I want my new data to overwrite my old data. And I would like it to identify duplicates by the ID field because that's the field we are distinguishing each node from. Now that I've configured my employee label, I'm going to do the same for the product and order, and I'm going to be back to show you how to do the same thing for relationship types. I just configured my node label to product. So I chose my node label to be product. I've added index to the label. I've chose all of the properties that I want my nodes with the label product to have. So that will be the ID, node ID, product name, and unit price. And I chose my ID to be the integer type and to be unique, required, and indexed. And same as before, I want it to be merged in case of duplicates, and I want to identify duplicates by the ID field. I just finished configuring all of my nodes, and now I'm going to do the same for the edges. So first edge is going to be a report to relationship type. So now I'm going to add an edge, and an edge is defined by its edge type, start node, at the end node. So the edge type, as we mentioned, is reports to. And now both start node label and the end node label, if you remember from our data schema, our employees can report to another employee. So both start node and the end node label are going to be employee labels. And now I have to add a property condition. Now, if you remember from our CSV file of relationship types, we have a start and the end column. So the start column corresponds to the ID of the starting node, and the end column corresponds to the ID field of the end node. So here we're going to just choose, I want my ID property of a node to correspond with the start column. So ID from the start column corresponds to the ID property of the node. And the same for the end node. I want my end ID to correspond to the ID of the node property. And that's it. I'm going to do the same for the sold and contains relationship types and be right back. I just finished configuring all of my relationship types and just wanted to mention when creating an edges, so you have to be careful of your data schema. How would you like your data schema to look? So here we can see that the edge type sold has the start node label employee and the end node label order. Because if you remember from our data schema or the graph schema, each of the employee could have sold some order. And the same is going to be for the contains. So when the relationship type is contained, the start node label is order and the end node label is product, because from our schema, every order contains a certain product. And now that we configured everything, we're going to start with the import process. Our validation was successful, and we are going on to the next step where we are going to upload everything to Memgraph. Our files have now been successfully uploaded, and we're going on to the next step, which is the import progress. So here you can see everything Memgraph does in order to import our files. They are removing existing data, creating constraints, creating indices, and etc. And all of the steps have been completed, and now we can go on to the next step. Database cleanup is also done, and we are actually done with our process. We've successfully imported all of our data, and now we can go to the query execution. Now that we've actually successfully imported our data, we can see in Memgraph Lab everything we've created so far. So now we have around 300 nodes, we have around 2,800 new relationships, 6 new indexes, and 6 constraints. Now, if you want to actually visualize what you imported to your database, you can run a certain query to visualize the data. So this query is going to return all of the paths in Memgraph. So it's going to return all of the nodes and all of the relationships those nodes are connected with. And you can choose to visualize it with either graph results or just the data results. So here you can see all of the nodes and relationships we have in Memgraph. And after clicking on a certain node, you can also see which node this is, which properties it has, and what values there are. You can also see the data results. We're going to get results as a list. Now, let's say that we want to maybe get some final results, and maybe we want to return only the nodes that are labeled with the employee. So we're going to run this query, which matches only the nodes that have the employee label. Now we can also get the graph results or the data results. And here you can see all the nodes that have the employee label. And you can also click on each and every single one of them. And let's say, for instance, that you want to return all of the nodes that are connected with the sold relationships. So I want to get all of the orders and all of the employees that are connected with the sold relationship. Or let's say I want to only retrieve the employees that have sold something. So I want to return employees that are connected with the sold relationship. And after running this query, we're going to get only few employees that sold a certain order. And now let's say I want to see what order that is. I'm going to put just order here, all the nodes with the order label, and I want to return those orders. And here now we can see the list of all of the orders that a certain employee sold. Besides that, I'll also mention we've created indexes and constraints, and you can retrieve all of those info with the show index info query. If we run this query, we're going to see all of the labels and all of the indexes we've created. Now here you can see that we created 3 indexes for the labels only. So we have indexes on the employee order and product label, but we've also created indexes for the label and property on that label. So we've created an index for the ID property of each of the label we have. Now, besides the index info, we can also show the constraint info. So if we run the show constraint info query, we can see all the constraints that we've created. So we can see that if you remember, we wanted all of the ID properties of label to actually exist. So we have a constraint type exist on all of the labels for the ID properties, and we wanted all of the ID properties to be unique. So we have three unique constraint types on all of the labels for the ID property. Let's now visit the query we previously ran. So as I mentioned in run history, you can see all the queries you already ran, and you can choose the one you want to run again. So let's say I want to run this one that returns notes with the employee label, and you can choose whether you want to run it in current view, vertical split, or new horizontal split. I'm going to choose the current view. And now after our query has been ran, you can see that all of the nodes are displayed with their label. So if you zoom in here, you can see that each of the nodes are displayed as their employee label. And let's say I want to change that. Let's say if you click on the employee, you can see all the properties they have. And let's say I want my first name property to be displayed here. And that way you can differentiate between your nodes. So you can do that from Memgraph Lab. We have something called Graph Style Editor, where you can edit the style and edit the style of the graph you want to be from your Memgraph Lab. So if you search through this Graph Style Editor, you can see that you have these commented lines. This function called has property. So if we uncomment these lines, you can see that if, for instance, your node has certain property, you can display that property. That property will be this first name property for us, and you can display it right here. You can choose the color of your nodes, you can choose the color of your text, so you can actually choose to have a certain URL here, you can have a certain picture here, you have a lot of possibilities. Those possibilities are all mentioned in our docs, so feel free to visit that for more information. But let's say I want to change my nodes to be orange color. And I'm going to apply these changes, and hopefully here will be displayed our names. So you can see now in our graph that our graphs are now an orange color. Their first name are displayed here, and if you hover or click on the node, it's going to change color. You can change that feature as well. Now we can also generate our graph schema. Each of our employees, it reports to another employee. Each of our employees sold certain order, and order contains certain product. And if you click on each node, you can see which properties are there. There are, of course, a lot more possibilities with Memgraph, so feel free to visit our docs to play around, explore, import your own data set, and hopefully this was a helpful tutorial for you. If you have any questions, if something was unclear to you, feel free to ask away on Discord. We have a great community there where we help each other and answer questions in no time. So hopefully this was useful to you, and I see you soon. Bye bye.